All right, so unmuted. We'll get started. Did anyone have a chance to read up on hooks last night? It's as long as you're reading through it. Yep. All right, cool. Any specific questions before we get started with today? We're talking about that.
Yeah, they were talking about it using it, and I was like, oh, pretty cool. But I can't remember what video it was that I watched because I watched so many.
You'll just have to rewatch them all to find a spot.
It could be. He's really good. I mean, if you've never watched any of his videos,
the heavy Boston accent. That's the only thing.
Oh.
Traversy Media. I don't know what it is. He's very like calm about it. I'm like, okay, so this is what we're gonna. He explains a lot too. Yeah, like why you're doing it.
It's good when someone explains more than when they type. It's good when someone explains more than they type.
Yeah. He just does it in a very non-jargony way.
He does, yeah, right. He's not. I guess you would call it plating.
Gotcha. You had a question?
Yeah. So when you use hooks that eliminate the whole like parent-child like that way?
No.
Okay.
Nope. It's separate from that. Yep. It's in addition to it. So when you're using hooks inside a component, you're accessing functionality that is typically only reserved for like a class component. But now you just have access to it in function components. So you can do the same things depending on which one you choose. Yep. But you can still pass in props. It'll still be a parent-child relationship. That's all remains the same. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about and implement some routing into this application, because right now it doesn't really do it. And so we have different pages in our app, so we want to be able to route to those different pages. And we'll talk a little bit more about hooks in general, because they'll come up now and then. And we're going to start to stub out the rest of the components for our application. And depending on how far we get, we'll start talking about what I refer to as data-driven component design. So you don't start the component until you actually have the data you want it to consume. Since we already have some example data, we already know that we have the data, so we're going to use that as our basis to create the components instead of creating the component and trying to shove data into it to try to meet its needs. All right, so we just got started. I haven't missed anything. All right, so we're going to start talking about routing. But before we show any code, I just want to show you this graphic, and I'm going to paste a link to it in Slack. All right. So this is the basis of routing in our application. Each box represents a component. And so we have our entire app component in the blue. The first child of that eventually will be a store, because we want to have access to our store throughout the component tree. And inside store, we'll have our router. This router may or may not need access to the store depending on what we pass it. But it's nice to have access to it. If your router needs access to the store, you don't want to put the store in the router, because it's the similar way props kind of go down into their children from a parent. It's that sort of concept of data flow is one way only. And then inside the router, we're going to have a header. We've already created that. And we're going to have a bunch of routes. And the way the router works is the router has access to what URL is currently in your address bar in your browser. And it says, OK, this is where the user is, or where they should be. And then it passes that data down to each route. And depending on whether that route is looking for that specific piece of the URL, determines which one will be rendered to the screen. So if we look at this illustration here, route that has just a slash, that's our home view. So that's your home page. That's your root. If our route matches the string of /inventory, we want to show the inventory components and shipments and products with their IDs. And we'll get into what this syntax is in just a bit. Has anyone gone over any sort of routing at all? Not to React, but like in general? Has that been talked about at all?
Routing when you buy like a router.
As in when you're navigating a site? Like in the Express application that you guys were using on the back end?
How does this word relate to the thing in the house called the router?
It doesn't.
At all?
No, it's completely separate.
Not at all.
When I say router, I mean the thing that has a piece of information and determines what should happen next based on that information. So nothing, okay.
The like endpoints for the API.
Gotcha. Okay, so right now we have, so you're familiar with an endpoint. So you can kind of think of it like that, where the base endpoint is slash. That's your home route. So if I say /inventory, you would expect that you'd go to something that has real information related to inventory, the inventory page. /shipments should be the shipment page. So you can go to any website that has nested routes, like say, perfect one is like Google, google.com/maps. I mean, you could say maps.google.com. They'll take you to the same place. But that routing exists. So you have your home domain, your root destination, and then everything after that slash is a route.
It's just like your file path.
It's exactly like that. The same concept. So you have a folder structure.
Perimeter is made up of.
So that URL in your address bar.
Yeah.
So if we actually look at the one that's up here, I know it's kind of hard to see. So it says drive.google.com. That's the home of Google Drive. /drive. So now we're inside the drive route. /u/q/folders. Like these are all destinations that you could potentially get to if you have access.
Is the parameter made up of routes? Is the parameters are usually like.
Parameters are things that are inside the URL. It's data that the router can use to kind of like pass down to the different routes. It'll make more sense once we start typing things out, I think. Yep. But it's basically a game of match. So I have a URL that says /inventory. And so the first route that matches, that's the one that's going to be activated, and that's the one that's going to display its contents. That's routing in a nutshell.
Think of it almost just like a tag in normal HTML to load a page. Like you don't necessarily need to go to a new page and split it around.
Right. If you think of it as your file system, let's say you're at your users directory, right? So users / your name. Now you're in the, so if I'm on mine, I would say /Joey. Well, now I'm in the Joey folder. Well, that could be the Joey route. /code. Now I'm in the code route. I'm actually in Joey /code. Right, so it's the same sort of concept. It's just another place for information to be contained. Yep. Yep. We won't be talking in here. Maybe the next one. Okay. So we're going to implement router, and we're going to use React router. So I'm just going to type React router. I'm going to do a quick search. The first link I get is the documentation for React router. Now there's two different routers, or there's two different ways to use React router. There's native and web. We're obviously going to use web. We're not working with React Native in this class right now. And then when we go there, if we could just click on basic in the examples, we can kind of see how this works. So if I click on home or about or topics, it's rendering different things based on, you see up here in the address bar, I'm at /about. If I click on home, I'm at /. If I click on topics, I'm at /topics. So the router says, hey, the user's going to this URL. Which one of you routes are going to take this? Right? So the first one that matches is going to win. So down here, let's see, I'm going to just get rid of this for a second. All right, and we'll zoom in a little bit. So this is the basic router setup. You have your router component, and inside that component are your routes. The routes have to be a child of router, otherwise they don't have access to the data in router. Right? So the same way you would pass props down to children components, router is going to be able to pass stuff down to its children as well. It just so happens to be the routes are looking for a router, and the router is passing stuff down, expecting a route to be able to pick that stuff up. So in this particular example, we have a route for just /, so that's our home. We have one for about and one for topics. So each one of these is a separate route. And you can see there's a component that's related to it. So if I say /about, it's going to display about. The component, well, the path for about is going to match what's in the URL. It's going to say, hey, I got a match. Put the about component up on the screen.
Why does one say the exact path and one and the other two?
So the concept of first match wins. / is in every route, right? It's always going to win unless you say explicitly exact. So if I were to say this, see how they're both showing? I don't want that. I only want one to show because both / and /about matched. So it looked at the URL and says, hey, there's a / in there. Display that. Oh, there's about. Display that. We don't necessarily want that. So if we say exact, and typically you would only use that on like the / route. Now only the one that matches exactly is gonna go. Yes.
So the words that you have in the curly braces, is that what is being displayed on the web page, the home topics instead of the curly braces after the equal sign?
So right here, so component equals home.
Mm-hmm.
That is the, if you oh, it's not imported here, it's in the same file. But down below, there is a home component.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see it.
So when this matches,
inside of H2.
yes.
Okay.
Yep. This entire component is being displayed.
Okay.
It's referenced here.
Gotcha.
I could say about, and if it matches exactly on /, it'll show about because that's the component I'm rendering.
Okay, so it's referencing the function.
Right. So if I switch this over to home, I go to /about, it says home because that's the component that's going to be displayed.
So if we were just doing this strictly as HTML, this is our AH route.
Yeah. So like I got rid of the code in here. I'll refresh it. These links are wrappers around that A tag. But those links know how to send data back to React Router, right? If you just use an anchor tag by itself, React Router will not respond to that. In fact, you'll probably reload your entire browser with whatever route you're trying to go to, and it probably won't match at all. So this link is very specific to that particular library. And just by looking at the syntax, you can probably tell what it's going to do. So this link goes to this route, and this is just the text for that link. That's like the text between the anchor tags. So let's start implementing some of this. I think if we start typing it out, some of this will start to make sense. But first things first, we have to install it. Can't use it without it being there. Oh, I was going to go here. All right, let me I forget, was this a good size? I guess it depends on the room we're in, right? It's much closer last night. All right, so my app is running. So I'm just going to say pwd. I'm in my client directory right now. If you're not in your client directory, you'll need to go into it. Is everyone there? We'll type npm install --save react-router.
Is there a difference between React Router and React Router down?
Oh, yes, actually, yes. Sorry. We'll want React Router down. We'll want React Router down.
Oh.
Yep. Although I think React Router down is part of React Router. I think it's like all-encompassing, if I remember. We'll find out in a second.
I was just gonna ask where you look, see if it would show, right?
I'm sorry?
It would show in the package.
Oh, if it's in there? Yeah, if we go to node modules, React Router.
I'll see React Router when I'm saying it.
Router. Route, match routers.
Oh, it wouldn't show up just in that JSON.
No, we're gonna want React Router DOM. Sorry, good call. So do the same thing, but append -dom at the end of it. Right, because we want the one explicitly for working with web applications with the DOM. All right, so if you look at package.json, we see React Router DOM in there. All good. Everyone see that in theirs? Okay. All right, so if we head over to app.js, we want our router to encompass our entire application because we want to be able to route from anywhere to anywhere within our app. So we're going to do it at the app.js level. So I'm just going to start this. I'm going to leave this open for a second. There's two different types of DOM routers that you could use. One is called browser router, and the other is called hash router. And the difference between the two is that when you're using browser router, it's going to use the URL as it is, as you would normally type it out. And if your application is controlling every single route or all of the routing logic of your entire application is in this app, then that's fine. If you are not, if let's say, for example, where I work, we use Microsoft.NET Framework, specifically the MVC framework for all of our routing. When we type in, let's say, Raymore and Flanagan / prospects / this, or whatever the term is, our MVC router is going to say, hey, all right, serve up that resource. If, for example, at Raymore and Flanagan / prospects, there's a React application, if I put something else after that, my React application will not load because it's not exactly at that route anymore. So you can't, so Microsoft's MVC is not going to forward on the rest of that information to my application. It's going to serve up that route exactly as it is. So in certain situations, browser router may not work for you, as it does not for us. So when we do implement React Router in applications, we use the hash router. And the way this works is if I go up to this URL right here, well, actually, let me just go to Google. If I put /maps, let's pretend this was an MVC application, that would serve up maps, right? if I wanted to get to that in something that has a hash router, I would say hash/maps. Now this probably won't work because I don't think they have any of that logic in there. Nope. But the hash is kind of like, okay, the URL stops here. This is the route you want to land on. Anything after that hash, now my React application can take over. Right? So it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're actually in the environment that it's the browser router is not working for you. But it's kind of like anything after that hash is basically ignored by like an MVC router. It's just not going to do anything with it. It means nothing to it. It's like, oh, you're at the end. That's it. But in our React application that implements hash router, it says, oh, there's a hash. I know what that means. Anything after that, I need to start passing that information down to my route to see which one's going to match, right? I wish I could show you an example, but legally, I can't fire that up and show you anything without getting fired. So I won't, I can't, but for my own personal sanity and financial reasons, I can't show you that. But yes.
So I've been like confused for a very, very long time about the difference between apps and like just using the internet.
Okay.
Is that the deal? The fact that like you can download an entire app because it has all that internal routing and stuff.
An entire app could have all of its routing built into it. Yeah. So when people think of apps versus like say a web page, depending on the type of code that's running at that particular location, it could be considered either. When most people think of apps, they think of something they download to like their phone or their computer. That's an application, right? Something I download to my phone from the App Store. That's an app. However, an application could just be application logic that's living on a web page somewhere. So there's a fine line, and it all depends on what you really call it, right? So we're creating a React application, but in reality, it's just a bunch of code living at some URL endpoint somewhere, right? We're not downloading it per se. I mean, we are downloading it to the browser so it can render it. We're not really downloading it to like our device, right?
When I go to the React app on the web, and then that same company has a React app for me to download.
Right. Normally when you think of app, when most people think of app, they think it's like something they download to the phone, and now there's an icon on their screen, right? And they click it and it starts the app. That's what most people think of, right? An application could be any piece of code that's serving some purpose, that's compiled or running, right? That is the application. So a browser is an application. A browser can download things and display it as an application, even though you're not really downloading it, quote unquote, to your hard drive. I mean, if you want to get really technical, you are, but we're not going to get into that sort of nitty gritties, right? But it's such a blurred line, right?
Not really just, I know it has to be made for the screen and everything, to be responsive, but isn't it just like a shortcut to the website?
It could be.
Yeah.
Yep, an application could just be a shortcut that opens your browser and takes you to a site. And it looks like an application. So therefore, it basically is. Yep. That's, in my mind, that's how I think about it. Right? It makes the most sense to me, and then I can just then forget about the whole term app at all. And that just means, okay, now I'm working on software, right? All right, so where was I? Oh, yes, browser router and hash router. That did not close. Okay. So we're going to implement hash router just to have you aware of it. Right? Now you can change it if you want. You can use browser router, but we're not going to actually use the word hash router or browser router in our code. We're going to use the word router because we don't want to get confused on anything. All we care about is that we have a router. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import hash router as router. So from here on, after line 4, hash router will be known as router. And what I'm going to do is, oops. So at this level right here, this is all of my application code. These are all my components and where they live. I'm going to wrap that entire thing in router. So this now lives inside of router. And then I'm going to say npm start.
So what happened to browser wrappers? We don't need that?
You can use hash router or browser router. It's really up to you. I'm going to use hash router because I'm used to it. And also, this is the only, nothing else is controlling our routes but this router. So it doesn't really matter. If we were in a Microsoft environment, it would probably matter. All right, so my application still renders. Nothing's really changed because there's no routes yet, right? I still only see this. This isn't doing anything. It's just there. But as you can see in my URL, it put in that /. That's my home route. I haven't typed anything else in. Now I could type other stuff in here. It's not going to do anything because there's no routes listening for that. So if we go, so is everyone at this point? Okay.
Sorry. From
React router DOM. All right. Okay, so inside our div with class name photobg, we're going to define a route. But first we have to import it. Can't tell you how many times I started using things without importing them. And then we're going to just do this for now. We'll start plugging in some props. So our home, we want home to show up if we go to just /, right? That's our home route. So we're going to say path equals /, and the component equals, oops, in curly's home. So I can now get rid of that home tag underneath. And if everything is well and good, I should still see my home route or my home component, simply because that's the only thing that's there. But I know I typed it incorrectly. It's actually finding the route. So if I type something else now, there's no other matches, right? There's nothing else to match against. Still going to render the first thing that matches. So let's go back. An error? Oh, you have to import it. Yep. Yep, I do that all the time. All right, so if we want to match this exactly, we just pass it the prop exact. Head over here. Now if I type something after the /, it's still rendering. Did I compile it? Oh, it's all from React Router DOM.
Oh, then I should.
Interesting. Well, that's new behavior. Component equals home. Probably because there's only one route. It's probably just going to render it. Oh, you know what? Let's see. Oh, no, that's fine. We're going to keep going. Let me just type something real quick. Okay, it is working. So I think it's because there's only one route. It has nothing else to do. Oops. And I haven't defined any other routes to try to catch something that didn't match. Okay, so we'll start here. All right. Oh, well, I said we'll start at this point.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So is everyone at this point where we've got a route? It's pointing to the component equals home. We're not there yet? Oh, Wassam's helping her. Okay. Everyone else is at that point? Does that work? Okay.
What is yarn build?
Yarn build is very similar to NPM start. Or NPM. Yarn and NPM do this basically the same thing. Yep.
Because you're telling it to render the home component, but the header is not part of that home. It just because it's going down the line.
Yes. Because header is not part of home, it's going to render all the time. It's not part of any route. So we should always see our header because we want to be able to navigate around our application. Yep. Whenever this route matches, this component will be displayed. If it doesn't match, it should display the next one that matches. But we always want to be able to see our header. So we don't necessarily want to put that underneath a route that's hidden away if we're not at the right URL. All right. Oh, actually, it is doing what I said it's supposed to do. Must have been cached. So if I go to, so I have exact path slash. See my taste adventure. If I go to say about, that text is gone. So it actually is doing it. I actually wasn't looking down past the header.
Wait, what did you get?
So I'm at the home route.
Yeah.
If I were to type about after that, because no routes are matching, the reason in my mind it wasn't is because that background is applied to everything, and I just simply forgot that. But we don't see the text anymore. So that home component is not actually rendered because that route didn't match anymore. Yes. Yeah, if no routes match, you can have a catch-all. Yep. I'm sorry?
I have a bunch of JSX errors.
JSX errors? Okay. Yeah, Jeremy's coming over for you.
Famous last word. Thank you.
Okay. So now we have a route, but that's not enough, right? We need some other stuff. There's one thing I did notice from last night, that these links are far over to the right. To put them to the left, like I showed up in the mockup, on the nav component inside header, get rid of the class name ML auto, and that'll move all your links over to the left-hand side. It's a class that says, hey, automatically try to push all these links around, or all these elements around, and whatever Bootstrap decided is where it should be.
Can you go back to the code where you just deleted? You just removed that?
So this line is highlighted, or this,
Are you still in that?
I'm in header.js. Yep. So on the nav component, just get rid of the class name. So it should just say nav and then nav bar.
Okay, so you're on outline 23.
Okay. I can close package.json. So let's start stubbing out inventory and shipments components. So at least we have them, and we can start creating some routes for them. So in our components folder, we're going to create a new file. Call it inventory.js. We'll just work left to right. Oh my gosh, can't type. And we'll import React from React. And create a function inventory. We'll just return something really simple. Just so we see something on the screen. And then we'll export it as the default. You can, there are extensions where you can create like what are called snippets.
Right.
Yep. Right, and it does like a basic boilerplate. I'm going to show you a shortcut that I use.
It's called Emmett, right?
Nope, it's a little simpler than that.
Oh,
Yep. So I'm going to make another component called Shipments. And here's the shortcut. You ready? Select all, copy, paste, rename. It sure is. Look at all the keystrokes I saved.
But you took the same.
Yeah, well, I got to keep it light. All right, so now we have an inventory component and a shipments component that both have something to render to the screen. That's all we care about at this point. So inside app, we're going to import those. We're going to import inventory. Are you? Oh, sorry. Yep. So we need to catch up a little bit. Oh. Okay. Sorry. Again, this is where raising hand saying, Joey, slow down. Let me know when you're ready.
That's all you did, right? You just changed the inventory.
Yeah, I just changed the words inventory to shipments.
So like I did this, I don't remember if it was a tutorial or whatever I did. They put all the routers in an actual like router JS.
You can definitely do that.
Okay.
Yep.
So like if I wanted to add a header to every page, would I stick some kind of out? Or could I just add that header to that router page area? Or is that like weird?
So we're essentially doing the same thing here,
Yeah.
right? The header's always there because it's not part of any route. Yep. If you wanted to like change the header based on which route you're at, you could import that header component into the component your route is rendering and just change whatever you need to, right? So you'll create the header component and just import it where you want it to be and then pass the props that you need to change it with.
Does it matter what order to import in an FJS? Like, should all the components be before the router, or?
No, this is fine. Yep. Oh, I should pay more attention to this one. Students. Okay. Oh, it should be over here. Yeah, the import statement, it's just going to import, as long as it's before the main body of your module here, right? You're not going to want to import after the function, right? You want all your imports at the top. But none of these imports are dependent on any others.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
How do you keep up with code?
How do I?
Yeah.
Barely. Everything.
I mean, you get like emails from or notifications, or do you read something? Like,
It's most,
somewhere?
yeah, so for me, if I'm interested in something, I'll look for resources on it. I don't necessarily like subscribe to anything specific. There's a couple things I do subscribe to, like the Node newsletter. I subscribe to that. And there's a couple other things that I subscribe to that if I don't subscribe to, I'll forget about them. But I want to make sure I do remember them. But in most cases, I just go out and I search for the things I want to learn, and I just dive right in. Yeah.
Oh.
Whatever's easiest for you.
I just wouldn't know.
Google search bar is a great first place to start. Yeah. As long as you know what you're basically what you're looking for, right? So crafting a query is almost as important as learning the thing you want to learn. Yes. All right. So is everyone at this point? Okay. All right. So where was I? So we're gonna inventory from inventory, and we'll import shipments from shipments. And everything should render. All right, that'll eventually go away. Okay. So now we're going to create a route for each one of these. So we'll say route, path. Now we don't have to worry about exact anymore. The only time we really worry about exact are like routes where there's just a slash, right? Because that could match against anything. Path equals, and don't forget the slash. We're going to go inventory. Component equals inventory. And I'm just going to copy that line down. Do the same thing for shipments. Save that. One good. So I go over to my application. Now I can't click on these links yet because we haven't set that up. But if I go up to my URL and I type inventory, it's probably hidden underneath the header. Let's make that bigger. Or let's do this. Oops. Oh, it's there. It's just dark text against dark background. What were we getting? Oh, it's because it's a case matters. At least in this one it does. All right, so has everyone seen this? Seeing this if they go to the route? So if I go to shipments, again, dark text and not enough of it. There's my shipments. Not very exciting, but we know our routes are working. Okay. So we get rid of that nonsense there. Oops. Okay. So now that we have some components, let's actually start creating them. So I guess we'll start with the inventory page.
Okay, just
Yep.
to follow up on that. So when you type in the Google bar inventory, then it doesn't have.
No, actually the URL doesn't really care. In this case, it doesn't. There may be some sites that do, but ours, we don't discriminate on casing in our URLs. But our file system, absolutely. Okay. So eventually there's going to be a lot that's going on in inventory, even though it's a very simple page. Let's go take a quick look at it. If we go to inventory, eventually we want to see this. We have a table with some links to other routes where we'll see information about our products. And then we can also sort things as well. So let's start crafting this thing up. All right. Back to our application. And inside inventory, let's at least get some basic structure around it and some style so we don't see dark text on dark background. So we'll get rid of that inventory thing there. And we'll say class name equals inventory dash page. And we'll do an H4 with the title of inventory. Well, let's see what that gets us. So now we have dark text on light background. Much better, but we could still see our pretty photo behind that. It's amazing what a couple styles will do for you, right? So the next thing that we need is we need a table. Table is going to be a separate component. So we do have to start thinking about creating another component. Now there's a couple ways you could do this. We could just write out a table tag and start putting in some headers and everything, or we can create another component and import it, which is what we'll do. Now this is the only route that has a table component, so we don't necessarily have to, but it's a good idea to get in that habit. So when you're kind of debugging things that are going on in your application, it's good to have those separated out so that you can go to that spot and only work on that spot. That way you're not looking at, say, 300 lines of code when you only should be looking at maybe 20. Right? So we want to separate that out. So does anyone remember how we created that table in the first JavaScript module that I was teaching? Anyone remember that? Where you created an element in the DOM, iterated over some data? Anyone? No? Okay. Oh, it wasn't that long ago. Gotcha.
That feels like so long ago.
And they were so nice. I remember how.
Yeah.
I'm mean now?
No.
Oh, okay.
It still comes through.
But yes, we will be mapping over data. So that's good. Okay.
Does create DOM node. Create DOM node, choose question mark, create file string.
Oh, yes.
Answering.
Yes. Sorry, I don't get notifications. I don't know how to do gold stars in Slack. You get a gold star. Okay. Let's see. I got to remember to look at that page once in a while. Okay. So let's start crafting out a table. This is going to get into any questions so far on routes? Oh, there's one thing we forgot. If we go to our app, we don't want to keep typing inventory into the URL, right? We probably want to just click on a link. Okay. So if we look at that React router documentation, we can see that in addition to router route, there's also a link. We'll probably want to import that. And since our routing, our links are inside of our header component, we want to go to header.js. Let's move this over here. Okay. So we'll go over to header. I can close app for now. And at the top, we'll just import link from React router DOM. Now down here in our header elements, we have a nav link. Yes.
How are you getting that inventory?
Yeah, I'm not getting that.
Okay, let's take a look for a second.
I had to switch that link to link.
I was just typing it into the URL.
Oh.
I didn't implement links.
Yeah.
That's what we're just about to do. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yes. but then we lose all our bootstrap styling and everything. Yeah, so we're going to keep navlink. There's a way to have, so navlink is just a wrap. It's basically an anchor tag with a bunch of classes associated with it. That's really all it is. But there's also a prop that you can pass in your own, basically your own anchor tag, in case you want to implement something that is something aside from what they've set up for you. So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to keep all the bootstrap styling, but we're going to use the functionality of our React routers link instead of just a basic anchor tag. Because if you remember what I said earlier, the link that you get from React router has all the logic it needs to find the router component and pass that information to it. Otherwise, just clicking an anchor tag will take you to a completely different route that your React application is probably not listening for. And it will re-render your page as well. So it may just re-render your app over and over again. So the way this is all tied together, and we'll get into this concept when we start talking about state management, is there's a concept called context inside of React. So normally in a React application, you're passing data down from parent to child, parent to child. Like sometimes that's called prop drilling, and it's mostly what it's called. But you have to pass data down one way. You can't really skip a step, right? So if there's a component that has 10 children and they're all childs of each other, right? So you're nested 10 deep, you have to pass that data down to each level along the way. That gets really tedious. It can cause a lot of bugs and errors because now you got to find all these places where this data is being passed down. So there's a concept called context where you have what's called a provider and a consumer. And React Router implements that. So the provider holds all the data, and the consumer listens for that data and reacts to it, basically. It consumes that data. So Router has a value, and that value happens to be whatever logic they threw in there for listening for the URL, what the URL is, if there's any parameters in that URL. And all the routes are the consumers, where when anything changes, Router says, hey, there's a change. And because those routes are consuming that data directly, it doesn't matter how deep they are in the component tree, they'll have access to it immediately. So that's the idea of context. The context of this component is everything inside of it. So I have a router, anything inside of router has access to that data as long as it's listening for it. But if I have a route that's in a component that's a parent of router, it doesn't work. So you can't listen down, right? You can only listen from what's coming up to you or up down to you. That doesn't make sense. You can't listen up, you have to listen down. All right.
Right now, we're just a component. Wouldn't it be looking at everything in that folder?
In this folder? Just because they're in the folder doesn't necessarily mean that they're parents or children, right? So I can have app and header at the same level at the file level, but because inside of app,
No, I meant just, it should just say, it just says components, like the href just says components.
oh, right here?
No, back
It said
with
in the header,
each reference of the code header.
in the header file.
Oh, in the header file.
See, it's highlight, you have it highlighted.
Oh, that's what the documentation supplied as an example.
But
um,
technically, it was just supposed to have everything in that component, right? And not know.
This is actually not a folder at all. This is just the name of a route.
Okay.
We don't have a components route, right? We have an inventory route. So if you were to implement an anchor tag, you would think you would do this. But because this is just a plain anchor tag, there's no logic to send it up to the React router. Okay. So we're going to get rid of the href. There's a prop we can use. Oh yeah, we can basically pass any props we want to navlink, and it'll forward it along to whatever we decide we wanted to forward it to. But we have to tell it which component is going to be listening for these props. And that we use the tag prop on navlink. And we pass it our link. Now, this is not a convention I created. This is something that React Strap said, hey, you can use your own link, but you have to pass it in through this prop. So underneath the hood, it's saying, OK, your link, I'll put my styling on it, but it'll use your logic. And this is just something I personally had to look up in the documentation because I wasn't sure how React Strap did it. Because I didn't want to type out a link tag and then add a bunch of different classes to try to match it up. I just wanted to use what they already had, but still use my own logic. So this is just how we get around that. And I had to read the documentation for that. It didn't really come naturally. I had to hunt for it. But I saved you the time of hunting for it. So our link tags also take a to prop. And where do we want to go to? We want to go to the route of / inventory. So if I ensure that I'm at my home route in my app, and now if I click the inventory link, it takes me to that route and it displays that information. Did you import it at the top of header.js? So you want to make sure this statement here. So import link from React Router DOM. You got her? Okay. All right. Everyone good so far? Eva, you're finishing up? What do you need to care? Tag equals the link, and then to equals a string with the route that we want to navigate to. You all set? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah, it's hard on your eyes. I mean, not in general.
Yeah.
I have a hard time adjusting.
Yes, Takir.
In my URL, it says 3000 /#
Yep.
Does it say that here?
Yes.
Yep,
that hash.
I have components, hash inventory.
Why do I have components? Oh, I know why it says components. That's because I clicked that link before I implemented router, and so it tried to go there. It completely ignored it. You'll notice. If we were using browser router, that would have failed miserably, because it's going to use exactly whatever the slashes are in that URL. And the reason everything's been working and I didn't catch it is because we're using hash router. So React Router is looking for that hash as its base. Everything after the hash, it's going to start using as its data. So that's why hash router was actually working. If we were to implement, in fact, let's do that real quick. I'll put that back to component /hash /inventory. If I change hash router to browser router, oops. Oh, the hash is still there. Well, it's still working anyway. I wonder why. No, actually, it's not, because it's not displaying any information other than my header, because router is not handling header. Like, there's no routes for header. But I can't get to anything unless I do it explicitly. So if I say just /inventory, now it's there. There's no component /inventory route. I'll change that back to hash router. Now my thing's all messing up. Okay. So other than that example of that URL, is everyone at the same level right now?
I still don't get a page of this inventory.
Let's take a look.
How did you get there? Just by typing it in?
So you go to your app.js. Oh, you don't have any routes. Here, let me pull that up on the screen so you can take a look. Oh, I have it. So in app.js, we want to define routes for those. Yep. So when you add a route for that, as long as you've imported shipments and inventory, yep. So just we'll create a routes for that. Yep.
Depending for routes for the hash. So it's like the host name / route hash.
Yeah. So. Get rid of so backspace twice. You're using Metron, right? That's why it's are you using no. So go back to your browser. After the 3000 slash, just delete everything. Injecting that slash or hash property. You probably still have the. Let me pull up the header to show you the syntax to inject the link. Oh, are you importing link from your head cards? Yeah, so let me pull over the file to get you caught up. So inside header, you want to import this on line number 2 here. So import link from React Router DOM. And then you'll need to do this to your nav link. You need to pass it that link component via the tag prop. So I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page here before we keep going. So we want to take like a 5-minute break. We'll just take 5 minutes. So I'll start up again at exactly 6:45. We'll do that. All right, so we're back. And just to ease my mind, I'm going to implement the route for, or the link for the shipments link as well. So we'll do tag equals link to equals / shipments. And now if I click inventory and shipments, both of those are working, even though we really don't see anything on shipments because it's all hidden underneath the header right now. But our routes are working. So that's fantastic.
Your routes are working. All right. You're on header JS.
Yep, I just did the same thing for the shipments link.
Okay. All right.
If you want to wait until later to do that one, that's fine, because we're going to work on inventory tonight. All right. So now that our header file is basically all set, other than those link tags, we really don't need to do anything else in header. Header is basically complete. So we'll focus on the inventory page. So we'll close out header. We can close app.js for now, and then we'll work inside inventory. So if we take a look at inventory real quick, we just see this table and some sorting logic going on. So we'll tackle the table first, because we can't really sort anything unless we have data in a table to sort on. So we'll do that next. And under components, create a new file. Let's call it table.js. Import React from React. Or you can copy and paste the shipments. If you want to do my shortcut, we'll declare a function called table. Hopefully I'll type better as the night goes on. And we'll export it as well. Now, fortunately for us, Bootstrap has styles to handle tables to make them look nice and pretty. So we're going to rely on the fact that Bootstrap is loaded into our domain here, and it's just going to work as long as we have the right classes appended to it. All right. So this is going to be kind of similar to what we did in the JavaScript module where we created a table with DOM nodes. We're gonna craft it a piece at a time and then kind of paste it all together. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So our return is actually not just going to be a div, but it's going to be a table. And we're going to have some stuff inside here. Oh, I just remembered. Someone had a question about putting comments in their JSX. Those you. Okay. So inside, because what I'm doing in here, I can't just do like // because it will render those characters to the screen. So if you do curly braces, and then this syntax, this is a comment for JSX. Because I'm evaluating this, but it's not going to render anything because there's a comment inside it. This is a valid place for JavaScript to be evaluated, right? So because I'm doing this syntax, I can't just do // in here. It actually has to be this syntax. But that's how I do a comment in the middle of my JSX code. In fact,
If I highlight and I hold down the command key and the \, it'll do it for me automatically.
Perfect, even better. Even better.
You know, what is that table React strap table?
This is a plain table. Yeah, this is a native HTML table tag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm actually not going to import any React strap stuff in this file. And that's partly because I wanted to show you React versus just regular, just Bootstrap classes. Now, fortunately for us, Bootstrap only requires a couple classes for tables. It figures the rest out based on the structure. So as long as we adhere to an actual, like the official table structure, it should render all the styles appropriately. And the reason I wanted to put this comment in here, it's a good thing that came up, is because I want to render a few things. I want to render the head of the table. And I also want to render the body of the table. I want to handle those things outside of my render function. I want to move all that logic out. Not all I want to do is just call these methods and just render it. It's just kind of going to clean up our return statement. Because if there's a lot of logic in return statements, sometimes it gets a little hard to look at because it's all jumbled in one spot. But if you separate these things out, it's kind of like the comment that I had before where you'll create a component or a file for each component, and then that way you only have to focus on that one thing at a time. So you don't have like a kind of like mind overload. So these are just reminders to myself that I'm going to render these things, render the head and the body in order, because that's the way tables are structured. So let's go ahead and let's think about the, where are we going? The head first. Sorry, I'm looking at my, oh, there we go. So I'm just going to do const render head equals. Now you can do a function. I'm doing it this way just to show some variety. And it's going to be equal to a function, just an arrow function. And I want to return something. In fact, we don't really need to do that. We'll just do function render head just to keep it consistent. I don't want to change up too much stuff. And I'm going to return the proper structure. So we start with a T head. Then we have a TR inside of that. I'm just going off of memory. And then we have THs. Now, we'll need to know which columns to render in this table. Oh, I haven't rendered that yet. I need to go to the actual one. So we have an ID, a product, and a quantity. So I can have ID, product, quantity. And now that's all I really need to do so far. So if I come down here and comment or uncomment this, keep the curly braces, because I'm calling a function inside my JSX. Save that. I'm not really getting anything. Oh, we need a class name of table. That tells Bootstrap to oh, actually, that's not the reason why it's not showing. Sorry. Here. Anyone want to guess why it's not rendering to the screen? I've exported it. Sorry, 5 people spoke at once. Not in inventory.
Render head and render header don't magic into this.
Right.
Nope, that's not it.
Two returns.
So the reason is I'm not importing table into this component. So I need to import that. And then I need to actually put it somewhere to be rendered. Not defined. That's interesting. Oh, header. I don't know why I'm typing. You can actually hear me. Okay, yes, you're right. Another gold star. Sorry, I see a chat and I think, oh, I have to type in here. Good catch on that typo, though. That was half the problem. All right, excellent. Okay, so now we see some headers. Let me know when everyone sees the headers in their view. Yeah, which one? Table. Luckily, this code is short enough that it actually fits on the screen with this large font. So far anyway. All right. Are we at a good point? Okay. We just see 3 column headers: ID, product, and quantity. So in our application, obviously there's more to it, right? We need to display some data. So we need a body. Can't just be a head with no body. All right, so yeah, everything relates to humans somehow. All right, so we have to create our render body function. So we'll do that right here. Function render body. And a table expects to see a T body tag. And then there's going to be a row for each piece of data. And within that row, there's going to be TD tags, or table data cell, or data cell tags. So since we don't really have any data in this component just yet, it's going to be kind of hard to think about that, right? So it'd be best, remember when I talked earlier about data-driven component design? We want to actually see our data first before we decide how we're going to craft this component. At least we have something on the screen so we know we're going to have 3 columns based on our mockup, right? But let's actually pull in some data and actually look at it. So and we don't even need to call a backend at this point. We actually don't even need to do that just yet. We do have our byte data.json, which is our data. We can actually just straight up import that right into this file just to use for crafting this component. And sorry. Oh, okay. To use JSON data in a JavaScript file is really easy because JSON will translate directly to JavaScript objects and arrays and so forth. So inside inventory, all we need to do is we need to import, and let's take a look at our byte data real quick. So at the top level, we have inventory. That's probably the one we want, right? So inside, not inventory, we want to import it in table for now. So we're going to import the inventory portion of our JSON data from, and then we just need to find the right path. So if we go up a level, we'll see we're at the source folder. Go up another level. Now we're at our client level. Go up another one, there's our data. And inside data, we have byte-data.json. Now you actually have to type out byte-data.json. Actually, I don't think you need the .json. I think it knows how to handle that. But I'm going to type it in there anyway. It knows how, it automatically assumes, first of all, that it's a JS file. If not, I think next it goes to JSON. I think that's the order. But I'm going to do it explicitly just as kind of a reminder to ourselves to say, hey, this is data coming out of a JSON file. So as you're typing those dots and slashes, you're going to see IntelliSense give you the location you're at. It's going to kind of help you. Oh, okay. You're right. Okay, now to data. Oh, I see. Because you find your component and then slash. Have it in the peer components folder. Yeah, that's why your route's a lot shorter. Okay, so now you should be able to use that same route there. As you start typing out, you should see the. You want to keep going up. So you start seeing that data folder. One more. Data, okay, and then you slash and then JSON. Or byte data. So mix one of these slashes out there. So let's start there. Yeah, that's another thing. Oh, yeah, I'm actually having an issue too. Okay, so we're going to do it a little different. So we're going to learn about another hook. And here's the way how we're going to do it. So I wanted to save some of the asynchronous data fetching towards the end. But since we've already been talking about hooks, and I don't really want to change too much of the structure of this because our JSON files are set up specifically, or package.json files set up. I don't want to change that too much. We're gonna use JSON server to serve this up to us. So this will actually be good. We'll have to do it eventually anyway, so we might as well just do it right now. And we're not going to do it at the table.js level. We're going to do it at the inventory.js level. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is because inventory, the table component Eventually, we're going to implement a prop called data, and we're going to pass our data into the table, and it's just going to render it out to the table structure. So rather than importing it into table.js and then having to go back to inventory and import it again, we're just going to start at the inventory.js level, and we'll pass it in our data in as a prop. So this will be more practice just using props with components and introducing a new hook. So is everyone at the inventory.js level, and does everyone just see table headers in their application?
I don't have it.
Okay, and that's probably because of those import statements are still there? This is before that? Oh, you don't have the headers yet? Okay. All right, so before we do that, yeah, let's do this. I'm going to save some time here.
Can you just put up your table set, table.js?
So inside here, no, why isn't that working? Oh, because, so if you paste this into your table.js file, you should be all set. I mean, we really haven't done anything really drastic in here. All we've done is type out some tags and stuff. So as long as you paste this into your table.js, we'll all be at the same table.js file. We'll just save ourselves some typing, rather than get hung up on syntax right now. Should just be able to highlight it. Oh, is that all? Well, you should be able to copy it. Just text. Is everyone okay over on this side? Good, good.
No, man, I was just looking at the viewer full screen. So it was your screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to select that. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool. Good. Kira and Jaquay, are you all set over there? I should have remembered water again. It's getting pretty dry. Normally, I don't talk this much. Normally, I don't talk at all, to be honest, except when I'm telling my kid to get off the couch from jumping on the couch.
So I'm right there where my tab should be.
Oh. It's just headers. Oh, yeah, you need that. There.
I had a question about when you copied it. It's commented on or not? I can tell. All one color. This. Here's this line right here.
Yeah, the comment.
Okay. So then, now I can everything. Oh, this, I forgot.
So that's gonna be now you're going on that. It's just one dot. Just here. Is that what you're trying? Oh, so we're not doing everything else?
Yeah, it's like everything.
You're changing that?
It was me.
All of the time. So you're importing here, all of the time. So let's just react. React. There.
Where's it white text? Just like generally select. There's a big text.
Oh.
Oh, because, all right, so I'm different.
This does need that last name.
Yeah.
It's rendered outside of the page right now. No, sorry, last name.
Oh.
Yeah.
They had something up there that we got rid of.
Okay, so then, yeah, if you just.
Understood.
Okay, page 4.
So figure out what you're doing. Otherwise. Okay, so I get, so it's still.
Last name implies the wrong thing.
All right.
This table.
We're gonna. This one? Right.
Thank you. That's one of two. The other one that we have is the
Yes.
Marauders map. And I'm like, it's being.
It's because of the classes. Yeah, in fact, it's probably rendering. So if you go back here, the thing. It doesn't matter if you enter the space between class name and profile.
Yeah.
Little computer that runs in a container.
I mean, there are
Basically running a web service.
the index,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the index. So, that's it when this background.
This image should be behind everything. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's at the Apple.js level.
I just have a lot of.
Yeah.
Like, check that wall.
Yeah, you know, you go now, once we're trying to like have multiple services, yes, multiple services. Everything called Kubernetes. And the orchestration of your document.
Oh, your items there.
The whole.
Let me bring this up real quick. And just focus on the one inventory one, just to get one of them right. And let me pull up header.js real quick. So your nav link should look like this. Tag equals link.
Look at it on the screen, but-
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yep. So because you're using the old href prop, it's treating it like a regular anchor tag and not like the React router link tag. So that's why it's not navigating to the right component, because it doesn't know where it is, because it doesn't have the logic built into a regular anchor tag.
So should I be looking at line 26?
Line 26, yes. And make sure you're importing link from React router DOM.
Yeah, I'll link.
It is? Okay, good. Yeah, so as long as your thing looks like this, then it should navigate to your route.
So line 26 to
28.
28.
We're just getting everyone set up in class here. Sorry for the wait on the remote end. And I almost typed that in chat.
See a chat with like,
Yeah, I have to type in chat windows. It's so strange that I'm talking at my computer and people can hear me. It's amazing. Okay. Go back to the code real quick.
Okay, so. Look, if I leave that line.
Yes, we just want to. Oh, it's just word graph. Well, that's why it threw me for a loop. I'm like, wait a minute. You don't need this much. Yeah. Oh, I was looking for you. Actually, keep this here, just put 2 equals in front of it. There we go. There it is. Okay, so when 3 people get back, we'll start up again. Actually, this is a good break time because we didn't really have a big break. So a couple of little breaks should be fine. Does anyone else need to take a quick couple minutes? Are we good? All right. We'll start up again at 7:26. We'll give everyone time to come back from the restrooms. And I know we did a lot of catching everyone up, but it's good that we're all on the same page.
anyone bring any candy?
Okay. So we're going to get started again now that everyone's back. Okay. So everyone should be at the same level right now. We should have something that looks like this on the screen with some headers for a table. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the inventory.js file. Now we learned about use state hook. So we'll import that. We're also going to use something called use effect. Now this is something that's going to act similar to how component did mount worked. And also for this, we're going to need to start up our JSON server. So if I start up a terminal, I start a new terminal. So now I have 2 of them. Check my directory. I'm in byte, so that's good. Oh, actually, I want to go into client again, I think. Hold on a second. Yep. So I want to cd into client. Because in our package.json file, we have a script for JSON server. So I'm going to say npm run JSON server. So that's going to be listening on port 3001.
Is it JSON?
JSON-server. So npm run JSON server. So now if I go over to a browser, I go to localhost 3001/inventory, I should see my JSON data. So we're going to import that into React asynchronously. So this would be cool. Now, just to illustrate some data on the screen, underneath the table tag, I'm going to put a pre tag. This is short for pre-formatted text. It basically creates like a monospaced font so that it looks more like code. But there's also a code tag, but that doesn't respect like line breaks and stuff like that. So
I'm sorry, you said pre stands for?
Pre-formatted text. At least I'm 99% sure that's what it stands for. That's what I remember. Yeah. So now I have a pre-tag, but I want to have something in there. So I'm going to use that use state hook. I'm going to create just some state. I'm going to call it just data, and then I'll have set data, and that is equal to use state. And we need a default value for this. We're just going to put, oh, wait a minute. No, this is going to be an array. Sorry. An empty array.
All right, so that's a paren and a square.
Yes, parens and then square brackets inside the parens. And then inside our pre-tag, we'll throw some curly braces in there because we're going to do some evaluation. And we're going to say JSON-stringify. Have you guys used JSON.stringify yet? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. This will make this easier. So we're going to pass in what we want to stringify. It's going to be our data. Have you learned all the parameters you can pass to stringify? So there's 2 more parameters. The first parameter is the data that you want stringified. The second parameter is typically null, but it represents a function called a replacer function. You can do some logic based on the data. We're not going to worry about that. And then the third parameter is indentation. So it's gonna, if there's any, if let's say it's an object or an array, any indentation is going to use 2 spaces. So it's going to indent each line 2 spaces. I could put 4, I could put 8, whatever you're used to seeing. It's typically 2 or 4. All of my presets are set to 2, so that's just why I use 2. So I'm going to save that. Inside my inventory page, all I see is an empty array, right? Now, normally I wouldn't see an array at all, but because we're stringifying it, we're taking that data structure and we're actually creating a string representation, and that's why we can see it now. So if I were to put some elements in here, you can see it's rendering that out. It's spaced 2 spaces for each indent, right, at each level. I just made the default. I put some elements inside the default.
Oh, 3 commas.
Yes, elements are separated by commas. Okay, so that's great, but we actually want to see our inventory data, right? So let's use our second hook. Is everyone at this point? Not yet? Okay, so where? JSON.stringify? We haven't done any of that yet. Yeah, you're actually good.
I'm sorry.
I have this one, but I just tried
Oh, here we go. Why it was hang up like that?
Are you running both server?
Yes.
Okay, and apparently I missed that stuff.
Oh, so
I know I completely blew up.
inside your terminal?
Right, now I know I can add one.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't sure like when you did that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That was the first thing I did. Sorry. Yep, so we'll run both servers.
All right, so I want to do the npm start and
And then start a new one. Make sure you cd into your client folder and do npm run json-server. So that is this script right here that we created. So you were able to.
maybe that's why I had that.
Oh, here. I'm gonna post or paste this into the Slack channel.
No, I do.
Oh, you have it? Good. Okay. Just in case anyone needs it. Okay. So how are we all doing? Are we there? What's the?
It says reactive use state is called in function inventory.
It's called a function.
I have just a little thing. Why is this little thing? Oh, no, I'm not in the right. Yeah, right. Right.
Oh, function inventory has to be capital.
Oh.
It's gonna think that inventory is a native element, and it's not. Yes. So you have to change your tag inside your where it's pointing in your route.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go over to yes. Make sure you import it proper casing. Also, in shipments will have to be that way too.
Yeah, I want to get rid of some of these that we're not using.
Yeah, it's a little gotcha.
Awesome.
Okay, how's everyone else?
Are you only working within those 2 files that you have up currently?
Currently, yes. And in fact, the only reason I had byte-data.json open is just to show which array I'm going to pull out of it.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I want to like get rid of some of mine at the top.
Oh, okay, yes. We're going to be mostly working in inventory.js. Yep. Keep this like it is. I'm going to close my terminal because it's not. We're doing on time. Okay.
So the script inside the package JSON file, in order to run the npm run, you can specify the name of the script and it'll execute that.
It's the double, the one before the trash can.
Right.
It doesn't use the ones you already opened yourself.
No. It didn't.
Kill the other one. Whichever one.
Okay, we can start over.
So it's the location of this.
Just do a control C in each one of those. That one doesn't have anything, so.
Here. Yeah. Wait,
Okay, just keep hitting that little trash icon until they all go away. Okay.
Oh, she's not,
Oh, yeah, you're not, yeah. You know what it is?
she's not, she's in the data folder, not in here.
Close.
And that's where that's being called.
Oh, no, I don't want to
No,
do it yet.
you're actually in the wrong folder. So you're in your user file instead of the client file. So in order for you to run your npm scripts, you have to be, so whenever you do npm or whatever, you have to be in the same file where the package JSON is.
It's helpful in Zoom.
So it needs
Yeah,
to
that's
be
wrong. Wait,
or C.
Okay.
So, yes, you are right, yes, you need data. So you gotta go out one, you're gonna go into.
Thank you.
No problem. Kelly, did that help?
Yeah, I got it to work.
Perfect.
Yeah, so- Now,
Caitlin, how are we doing over there?
in order for you to run your npm command, you need to be in the same directory that your package JSON is. Because it looks for that and tries to execute it.
Cool, awesome. All right. Elizabeth, how are we doing? You have one extra parentheses right here. Just get rid of one of those. Should be all set. Follow the squiggles.
They don't make any sense to me.
Eventually, maybe they'll catch up.
In GPS, I was told that would, you know, make me less apt to take 3 hours to get to every time.
Okay. How's everyone else? Good? Okay. So let's talk about use effect. Or if you remember in stateful components, state or class components, we would have access to this component did mount function call, right? And inside there, you could perform a fetch, and that fetch could bring back some data, and then you'd say this dot set state and update some state. So we're essentially going to do the same thing. Was there any data fetching in the previous React module? Did Alice go over any of that?
Component did not.
Did you perform like a fetch?
Fetch those server.
Okay, cool. So we're essentially going to do the same thing. We're going to say now before with use state is going to give us back something. Use effect isn't going to give us anything back. It's just a function you can call. So we're going to say use effect.
We need to import that.
Yep, so you need to import use effect from React. And use effect takes two parameters. The first one's a function. And the second one is an array of dependencies. So what that means is when this component gets created, use effect is going to fire this function as long as any of the dependencies in this array don't match the previous version that it once was, right? So it's going to keep track of what those values are in that array of dependencies. And if they change, it's going to fire that function. If they don't change, it won't fire it, right? If you keep it empty, it'll only fire it once. Because use effect will always fire at least once.
But if we have color red in there and we change it to blue, it's gonna fire.
Yes, because something changed, right? Hence, if we have our default data, right? If I call set data, use effect will fire. If I have data as a dependency, and it sounds a little weird, but we're not going to do a dependency just yet. I wanted to let you know that that's there. And do we use it? Oh, that's right, because it's not in that component. Let's just work on the function part. So for now, just know that that dependency is there. If that dependency array is blank, it's only going to fire once. And that's kind of equal to our component did mount. So when this component gets created, when it gets mounted to the DOM, component did mount will fire. In this case, when this function component gets created, gets mounted to the DOM, use effect is going to fire once. Because we're not listening for any other dependencies, we're not listening for any other changes. But since we have use effect, and it's a function that we're calling, it will be called at least once. So what can we do inside use effect? Practically anything, right? So there's a lot of things that we can do. We can say, for example, so we know that, not that one. We know that this is our default array. I could say set data. I could pass in a new array. And now it's the new array. But it's only that a new array once because of that empty dependency array. We're not listening for any changes or anything. It's just going to fire it. So that's pretty useful, right? We have a default array of data. I'm just going to put this back to an empty array just for simplicity's sake. So I'll save that. I see an empty array. Now I can go inside here and I can perform a fetch, grab some data, and then call set data and inject that into the set data function. Make more sense, hopefully, when we type it out. So we're going to say fetch, and we need to give it a URL. That is our local host, port 3000/inventory. So that's the endpoint that we want to hit. And since we're not posting anything, we're getting it. We don't have to add any more options. We just say fetch this stuff. And then when we get it, we say .then. We get our response. Now our response is just a raw response object. We have to do something with it. So we want to turn, since we're getting JSON data, we want to call the JSON function on that response. So that's going to take the JSON data out of it and give it to us in our next .then function call. Is this feeling familiar from any fetches that you've done before? Okay, cool. So now that we have our JSON, we want to call set data, pass it in. I'm going to save that. And now if I look at my app, there's my data. Is everyone seeing that?
In the 3,000.
3001.
Oh, 3,001.
Yep, our JSON server should be running on 3001. All right, so I'll keep that on the screen. For anyone, is anyone seeing that data in their app?
Try it. Great.
So you just did asynchronous data fetching. That's it. I mean, there's more to it, right? Like there's a lot more things you can do, but the basis of all of that is literally just that. You called an endpoint, you got some stuff, you updated a piece of state, you displayed it. That's the bare bones, all you really need to do.
NPM star.
Jason, J-A-U-S-O-N again.
What are their logos? Weird.
You start, here's your app.
Yeah.
Here's your app. Okay, there's your app. And then go back to your terminal. Go to your other terminal window. And then this one, make sure you are in client. NPM run. Yeah, you're certain. So there's the data. So now if you go to your app, go back to your you actually have nothing to do with it. And so go to the other one. Go to that one. And just or hit hit no. Yeah. Because you already have just hit the trash can. Yeah, so now you already have these two running. So if you go back to your app that's running, it's the trash can. Oh, it's something at 3,000. Yeah, it was 3,000.
That function call.
That's just default. There you go. Voila. Data for the masses. Oh, yes, correct. And typing into the chat. I have a magic chat window right now. Yeah, so Caitlin, are you seeing data? Awesome, you just did data fetching.
So you want us to go to localhost 3001, and we should be able to see the server?
Yeah, if you, like in a browser window.
Yeah, so you're basically transforming the data, so you get the data, and then take the response, transform it. You take that JSON, and then
So 3001 is your JSON server, so you're not going to see that.
Oh,
Yeah. But you should see it show up inside your reactive.
well,
Which
so
is
data,
3,000. And I don't know what to say.
do you remember the set data?
It'll be a great extension.
You know, I usually just go like Safari.
So we have the use state.
It's just easier for me to command that.
Yeah, but really, basically, it's inside the data.
There we go.
Not running.
From what you got back.
There's this.
Perfect.
Wow. So we'll see when that is.
So this looks good. And 3001 is running. Okay, that's What does it look like in your app? Oh, you don't have your npm start is no longer there. Right, if you go to here, do you have anyone, so hit a plus, hit the plus icon to start your terminal. And make sure you see the interior client.
I'm tired. Leave me alone.
npm start. That'll start up your React development server. Looks like it got shut down. Oh, it's in here. It's in the components.
Doesn't belong there.
There. Gonna move it by mistake. Oh, because, so let's go back to import tab. Oh, components tab. Oh. This line 3. It's yeah. Okay, save that. Oh, Control C. Means it doesn't know what it is. Right here. We go to Next.js. Here's tab. Yeah. There's maybe just one little typo or something. I can't resolve this, so that means it's probably might be something that's not that. Okay, yeah.
Probably in here. Then.
Probably in here. Yep, and then recheck the import from inside the index.js file.
Got it.
Yep. If for some reason it can't see a component, and it might just be a misspelling somewhere. Okay. All right, so everyone saw data. Everyone's cool there. Okay. All right. So now that we have data in our application, and my other computer started sleeping. Okay. So we have in inventory.js, we have access to this data. Our table, we want to be able to pass this data down into table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out that pre-tag. I'm going to paste it in table.js. So I took that out of inventory.
Yeah.
I cut it out. And I'm pasting it inside. Well, I can't put it inside table because that's not considered valid. So I'm just going to wrap table in a div and paste it at the same level of table. Because a pre-tag is not allowed inside a table. The only thing that's allowed inside a table are t-body, t-head, and t-foot.
Why are you taking the pre-tag from?
I'm taking it out of inventory
Why?
because we were rendering it there.
Oh, okay.
Because
So
if
you wanna render it
basically
somewhere
what I
else.
want to do is I want to show that we're getting data passed down via props into our table component. Did that make sense? Yes, no?
You just wanna render it somewhere else.
Okay, so we'll start over here. So I'm going to take this pre-tag out of here. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to wrap my table element in a div. Because you,
Went to the table, file.
yes, in a table.js. I'm wrapping table in a div. And then after the ending table tag, I'm going to paste my pre-tag. Here's some using size. So we're going to do this. So inside Slack, your table.js file should look exactly like that.
And we should get an error. Where it says data,
Data is not defined. Yes.
yeah, not right there.
Is that why you were like, this isn't working?
Yeah.
That's why I heard those like, "Ugh."
Well, I also cut and paste the pre line and then cut and paste again, like something else I moved.
Oh.
I lost it
Oh,
entirely.
okay.
Yeah, so that's why we were like,
Just the pre-tag. Yeah. All right. So in function components, when we want to receive props, every function component gets passed a single argument called props. If I want to pull out data out of that, I could say props.data. And I still see this. I'm still actually rendering that properly. And just to prove it, inside table, where my third parameter is 2, I'm just going to change the indentation real quick. Nope. Hold on. Oh, no, I know exactly why. I should have seen nothing before. And that's because I'm not actually passing data to table yet. So table can take props just like anything else. So I'm going to say data equals data. And there we go. So inside your inventory.js file, instead of rendering that pre-tag, we're going to pass data to the table via the data prop. So data equals curly braces data.
And you don't need this type of, you just need props.data.
Yes, because there's no this. Well, there is, but it's something completely different than what you think it is. But it's not this props.
Props.data is props, not defined.
Yep. So if on line 3 here in the table,
Oh,
that first argument is going to be our props. Now there's another way that we can pull out data out of props. And that's by changing props to this syntax here. This is destructuring what we went over the day before. So instead of saying const curly brace data equals props, we can actually just put this syntax right in here, and it's going to destructure those properties out of props. Hold on one second. Let me mute just for a second. Scroll down.
Yeah, yeah. Should it be rendered head there at the bottom? Aren't we doing the return render body there?
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Yep, I just have it commented out just to remind myself to do that.
No, I mean on the line on top of that one.
Oh, this one?
No, just where it says render head over the comment. It should be that.
Yes, it should be that. Yeah, because that function is up here,
Okay,
and we're calling it down here,
gotcha.
and it's returning these elements for us.
Okay,
So we're just breaking it out instead of doing everything in the return statement.
okay. And that wouldn't have changed. The app looks the same after doing that.
It would have looked, yeah, exactly the same, except we've got some data here. Okay. All right. So did this part make sense up here with the destructuring syntax? Did everyone follow that part? So instead of saying props and doing props.data, because little spoiler, we're going to be using that data quite often, and we don't want to keep writing props.data, props.data, props.data all over the place. We just want to be able to just write data. So since props is technically an object with key names on it, one of those key names is data, because that's one of our props. We can use that destructuring syntax to pull it out of props right off the bat. Because that's the only prop we care about, and we don't have to worry about anything else just yet. We can add more to it, and we will get to that at some point. But for right now, all we care about is just the data prop, so that's all we're going to use. So I can actually go down to line 26 here, and I'm not going to stringify props.data anymore. I'm just going to stringify data. So when I save that, it still renders the same. It's still getting that same data, but I've pulled it out of props first, and then just referenced it later down in the code.
So you don't need the friends and like pre on the pre line.
Oh, and the pre-line? So I still need this,
Right,
but instead of saying props.data,
right,
all I have to do now is just say data.
right. I'm just looking at the syntax, so it's just.
Oh.
parentheses.
Gotcha. Yep, json.stringify. All right. So now we're passing data. We're getting data from a backend. We're passing it down into a component. And now we need to do something with it. So we've got, let's see, we've got 15 minutes. That should be enough time to take that data and render it out. Maybe. Yeah, we'll at least get that part started so that we're all at a good working spot. There is a little bit of mapping that we're going to have to do because all we have right now is an array of objects. Right, so if we look at this data, we have this array of objects. In order to render a row in our table for each one of these, we're going to have to map over it. Right, so map will always, whatever array you call map on, will always give you another array. And as long as you keep returning the elements in that map function, you're going to get the same number of things in that new array as it was in the previous one. But we don't want the raw data. We actually want to render rows in a table. So .map is going to allow us to transform our object into HTML, essentially, or in our case, JSX. So let's do that real quick, or at least start to. So in our render body, because that's the body of our table is going to have all of our rows of data. Let's start rendering this out. Okay, so inside our T body, we need table rows. We need TR elements. But we need one TR for every single record that's being passed in our data array. So in order to do that, we open up some curly braces and we say data.map. And we want to render a row for every single one of these data objects, every single one of these inventory objects. So map takes a function. And the first thing, we'll just do function just to make it explicit here. And this function takes two parameters, or accepts two arguments. The first argument is the element that's being iterated over. In this case, it's an inventory item. What did I call it down here? We'll just call it item. It's one particular inventory item. And the next argument that gets passed in is the index of where we're at in that array. So we'll just call it item index. And what we want to do is we want to return a TR element for every single one of these things. Now, the one thing, does anyone remember when you're returning arrays of React components or elements, there's one thing that we need to do. We need to add a key. And just for, let's see, we have in our byte data, every one of these objects has a unique identifier, so we're going to use that. In fact, we don't even need item index, but we'll keep it there. I think, yeah, we don't even need it, but that's okay. So the key is going to be equal to item.id, because each one of those is unique in this data set. If they were not, then that's not something we'd want to use, because React's going to say, hey, I need a unique identifier for each one of these elements in this array. Otherwise, I have no idea how to track it. Right? So if I need to re-render the screen and there's a change, I want to know the exact order they used to be in, so I can compare it to the new changes and see if I need to update anything in the DOM. All right. Inside every TR, we need TDs. And we have 3 columns, so we need 3 TD items. The first one is our ID. So we could say item.id. Second one is a product, which is item.product. The third one is item.quantity. Save that. Okay, oh, that's right, we haven't called it yet. So down here, we can get rid of this pre-tag. We know we're getting data in our component, so now we just need to work with it. So if I uncomment this render body, save that, we have a table full of data.
Very nice.
So knowing the structure of that table helped us, because we knew at exactly what level we needed to map over our data, right? We know that every single one of these records, every single row in a table represents a record in this data set we're getting back from our database, quote unquote. And so that's what we need to map over. We need to map over those items and create a row for every single one. Every row contains table data elements, those TD elements, and then we just put the relevant pieces of data in each one. Right. So this, believe it or not, this code is far less code than what we did back working straight with the DOM, right? We did, what did we do? Document.create element, this thing. Document dot, set attribute, this thing. The nice thing about this is we don't have to do all that. That's abstracted away from us. And that's what is the quote unquote declarative nature of React. We tell it what we want, it'll go do the nitty gritty stuff for us. We just tell it what we want. I mean, there's still things that we have to do, like map over data, tell it which things to render to the screen, but 90% of the hard work, React takes care of it for us. And that's a good thing, because we don't want to spend all that time coding all those low-level things. We want to get some stuff done. So is everyone around this basic point? I know we'll get you your we'll get you the code there. Is everyone else seeing this? Okay, so we're at a good point where I can take this code and I can push it up to a repo in case anyone needs it, and then for the next 8 minutes that we have until 8:30, if there's any specific questions to what we've gone over so far, or any things like, hey, can you explain fetch again, or anything like that, now would be a great time for that. How are you doing, Tim? Doing good? I know I don't usually hear much from over there. I just want to make sure you're all right. Do you want down here? I'm going to move this just slightly. And Caitlin, do you have any questions? Magic chat window. Yeah, after this, I'm going to start talking at my chat windows. Maybe no questions. I'm not muted or anything. Okay, that's good. Probably would have let me know if I was. All right, so I can go around and you have a question? Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so it doesn't see it as the array yet. So let's go into table.js.
Yeah, I lost, right before I started last week, I lost my dad.
And scroll all the way up. Okay, so on line 4, where you have the data, wrap that in curly braces.
Leave it in the.
Yep, so yeah, inside the parentheses, so just around the word data, wrap that in curly braces. Because that's the syntax that destructuring syntax. Because props is an object, so we want an object destructure.
Was there an import there?
So you did this up top with your function table data?
Oh.
And it looks like that part.
Oh. You still need this up on screen?
Yes. Or if you just push it to the end.
Okay. Sounds great. All right, so do you need to scroll down or anything?
I don't know, I lost my dad.
Oh, let's take a look.
I lost the dead.
Oh, render body still commented out. 36. Keep the curly braces. Yeah, just that. So scroll all the way up.
But then again, I say that, I don't know what they gotta do.
Data. Okay, let's go to inventory.js. Oh, you're not passing it to table yet.
Yeah.
So table, I'll show you on the screen. So you have to pass the data into table. So right here, we're saying the data prop equals data. So it's
That makes-
cloud,
yeah,
but
that
it was kind of that way. Sorry, that's my standard response.
Yay. Why?
So that's weird.
So
So actually,
you have all the files. Just need to get the right code. So I'll propose. that-
Thank you.
So these tell me something with the tag. We can get rid of this.
Actually, could I get one of you guys to watch me do this GitHub thing?
Yeah, that's fine. So what do you want to do?
Master GitHub. So I just wanna save this, so I'll just call it.
Put it add a curly brace. Okay, so these match out. That's good. And now we need to match out the next tree. So we need another curly brace.
I just, doesn't matter if I use something. So then this one?
The key equals.
So you wanna-
So we're gonna have to wrap these in the curly brace. Yeah, wherever you have, when you're inside the.
These all your changes first.
Yeah.
No, not that, not that.
Yeah,
Remove all your changes. Well, they're a little too close together. So we're gonna, yeah, so now they're all ready, they're like added. Now you wanna commit them with that message. Commit and push.
Angle bracket, that's what it was. But I've always known.
And you committed it, and now you can push it again. So you've committed it, you've created
Yeah,
it.
that's okay. So I just put the message in and then hit the check mark.
Yep, and now you want to just push. Could you-
Oh, we can close the project. So you have it open here.
So you haven't pushed those, or you haven't pushed any changes like the GitHub, have you, before now? In this
I
project?
don't think so.
No. Okay, so we need to set up a
Oh,
track for
parentheses,
branch.
because we're inside the net function.
Okay.
Excuse me? One more time, please.
Too bad.
Okay, we can close that one off. That's good.
So we're gonna push to, we need to.
Oh, yeah, so this is the street.
Yeah, well, I need to grab, do you know your GitHub, like,
My name.
so you need to put your, a repo, so we gotta go to GitHub and actually create it.
I got this far.
Okay.
So just a little bit so we can see the start of this. So our inner return statement, we need the parentheses back and the T. That'll close off our return.
Or we could do it, new repo, with new.
And then another curly brace will match up on the render body. Just that.
Right,
So this, so that ends that function.
that's we're gonna give it a name.
And above div, we're going to make return.
Alright, so now we're gonna take that.
What do I do then?
Right there.
Just erase it.
Okay, that's what I do.
Yeah, that's all I do. And then a closing parentheses after the closing.
And we're gonna do that.
35. Let's just erase it for now. Let's just get the syntax. Okay, cool. There's one.
Did you pull this from, did you pull this repo?
No,
Did you pull it from somewhere?
no, I just.
It should be ended in the entire component function.
I think I just started it. Yeah.
You did it with module.
It's pretty
It looks like you injected in one.
Yeah, I don't know, that works. That's what I'd say too.
And this,
Or get something.
Never mind. I'm not making it syntax highlight. Went away. Very bottom. Okay, so now we need to export this. Export default. Table.
it's actually pointing mouse.
Syntax also table. We still need to render the body, so we need to call that render body function. We basically do the same thing here, so I call render body instead of render head.
That was already well.
So I'll do. At least on that code change.
You're right.
So I need to show the screen. Sorry, stream's still going. We're all set. So no homework tonight, other than just research things you want to add to your capstones that you've seen here, or just compile a bunch of questions that you may have for me tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to go over the rest of the table component logic. So we're going to do, we're going to add some links inside of the table so we can link out to each product. So we'll do a little bit more routing, and then we'll finish up the table component. And then I think at that point,
So is that in the sandbox?
that point, oh, I closed that window out. But at that point, we should be getting into stubbing out the list component for the shipments page. So it's going to be very similar, but instead of creating a table, we're going to be creating a list.
Okay.
Right? So this will be good practice for the next one.
If I change her origin